Hello everybody, Bryan here again for another walk and talk. Back to a familiar place. Been here before for another video. This is Franke Park, the back end close to Goshen Road. Decided to start back here. Happened to be in the area. I went to a hardware store in the area. Need to pick up some lawn care stuff. And you know how it is. You get in there and you know what you're looking for. Not exactly the brand. We have a budget in mind. And I'm about ready to make a purchase, and then someone walks up and says, "Hey, can I help you find something?" I go, "Yeah. I need something that'll help with killing all that creeping Charlie that's in my front yard." She starts giving me a very elaborate rundown of the best product to use, and she's very well informed because she used to work for a particular company that makes a weed-killing chemical. And from my talk with her for about 3 to 5 minutes or so, I decided not to pick up anything at all and wait until another time. So kind of went out of my way for information and not a product, I guess. I would like to say before I get into the main topic of the day is that the temperature right now shows 90 degrees. However, with the heat index, it's closer to 102. So that's been the talk of the town here lately, this heat advisory that we've been under since Tuesday. Yesterday, of course. And I can see why. If you're not into the heat, this would be absolutely stifling, oppressive, you might say. Totally understood. But for me, there's something about the heat that I really, really like. A number of years back, I went to Arizona. Went to a conference down there for something, and there's not a conference, a convention, sorry. And one of the days down there was 115, and I'd never experienced a high dry heat. Here in Indiana, we have just a variety of ranges of humidity on any given day. So a 90 on one day might be a little different than a 90 another day. Today it feels pretty humid. A lot of moisture in the air, but down there, it was weird. It was blistering hot, but I didn't feel oppressed. I didn't feel like just stifled in my step. It was in some way very cleansing. I took a drive into the desert, and it just felt great. I can't explain any further than that. But what I did notice that my body chemistry seemed to have changed after experiencing that. I was down there for only about 3 days. And I tried to go outside as much as I could during that time. When I came back to Indiana, I noticed the heat up here. It's hot, but I could withstand it much better. So I think my my frame of reference for hot is that short period of time in Arizona, which I love the state. It was a wonderful place to visit. Maybe in the future I might find myself living there, but we'll see. So today's topic. The subject of the temperature actually encouraged me into today's subject matter. I stepped outside to start working on the lawn. Yes, here in Indiana, you don't do that unless it's under 90 degrees. So people will give me kind of the weird look who are out in the neighborhood. So I was out there to do my stuff, and I was feeling kind of sarcastic in a funny, snarky way. And I said, "Oh, this heat is like the warm embrace of a loving mother." And I kind of laughed because that's not exactly the way I would have described my mother. And in other videos, I have alluded to the idea that my time with her was a mixed bag of happy and sad and downright pathetic feelings, because she wasn't really mom of the year material. I know it's very common for people to say that. We look to our past as a bit of a not really rose-colored glasses being worn, but that slightly exaggerated form of, "Oh, I had a terrible childhood and my mom was terrible." it wasn't exactly that. She had her issues, and it affected me very deeply, and I had to learn how to kind of suppress those feelings deep inside when I was a kid. I had to grow up really fast and mature and be ready for trouble at any drop of a hat, any noticed moment. And it got me thinking about the way we work within a school. We can't always detect when there's a child dealing with those problems. Like myself, they might be doing the same thing. A particular defense mechanism is to not let your card show. Don't show your hand to anybody else. You want to hide it. You want to keep it close to yourself. Well, that's fine if you're looking to avoid unnecessarily difficult discussions with folks, but it's not really good for your emotional state. It raises stress levels. Bottling up your feelings is not good for your system, and as it concerns future behaviors, not addressing pains could result in neurotic behavior as an adult. I mean, this is just basic psychology 101, and it's a sad fact of our reality. It's a common feature of being young and growing up in a household that might be lacking in a lot of ways, but there could be positives just around the corner. And we as educators, or those working in schools, we don't always detect what's exactly going on. Sometimes you hear about things, kind of in a word of mouth. Oh, did you hear what happened with Timmy and his parents? That sort of talk. Because there are things that protect kids from, and really everybody, from unnecessary spreading of personal information. I didn't talk about this the last time I was here, I don't think, but this park is connected to a zoo, Fort Wayne Zoo. And if you look closely at this sign, you would notice that it says Fort Wayne, and there's a big gap, and then zoo. Well, there's a good reason for that. Over here in this spot, there are tiny holes where other words used to be. This used to be the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo. And 2 or 3 years ago, they had dropped that name and just became Fort Wayne Zoo. I think there was a business reason for that. When you advertise yourself or portray yourself as a children's zoo, there's a certain expectation that people have. And I think this particular zoo is going for something a little more different, a little more proper to a conservatory or a conservation zoo. It is ranked number 7 in our country for good reason. It's a wonderful zoo. If you happen to be visiting Fort Wayne in the future, try to make an attempt. Try to make an attempt to go. Visit, enjoy what they offer. It's a lot of fun, but not on a day like this. This is when the animals will hide in the shade or a log or something like that. My favorite animal at the zoo is the Canadian lynx. I just love the lynx. We have 3 of them at this zoo. And when it's a nice day, they'll be pacing along the fence, looking around, playing with some of the toys in there, sniffing around. They're lovely, beautiful creatures, and I love watching them. But I wouldn't want to go to the zoo today. It's just a bit too much on the warm side for the animals. But anyways, back to the talk here. It's hard to detect when a kid is dealing with problems at home. We've talked about that before. It's really upon that student to bring it up when they're ready to. I talked about my friend Violet, who over a series of months of growing trust between she and I, she revealed what was going on in her home. And as I stated, I treat it very seriously. I first am thankful that I'm being told that sort of thing. It shows that that student views me as a trusted adult. And there's a reason why I use that term quite often in these videos, because it really, really matters. As you would imagine, we're working with kids who are not our own. We are entrusted that was loud. I think the video caught that loud noise. I wonder if that's a 12 o'clock alarm. Some small towns have that, where at 12 o'clock they ring a bell or they sound some siren of a sort, and just to keep the emergency technology on the up and up. But anyways, man, that's loud. That is very loud. But yes, being a trusted adult in a school is a very important thing. I value it highly. I treat it seriously, for not only the sake of my employment, but for the safety and security of the students. And to be given that privilege is an honor, because it's not like the students are out there just sharing it with everyone. There may be some who do, but in my experience, they don't do that. They don't typically find themselves doing that, because I think to them it's a point of embarrassment. Because if you think about it from the eyes of a child, they love their parents no matter what. And that's who they know. It's when they entered the world, that's who is there. And even bad times, they still have that connection. There's that biological connection, but then there's something that goes a little deeper than that. Brain chemistry gets involved, feelings of love and devotion get involved. And it takes a lot for a child to really reject their parents. So when things go wrong in the home, it's hard for them to admit it, because in some ways it admits that their feelings toward their parents might be wrong. So when you are in a school, it's not a good idea to squeeze that kid so much that they're forced to reveal things. The best you can do is offer them a safe space and say, look, I don't know what's going on in your life. I suspect something is going on. And when you're ready to share, I'm ready to listen. And that's the lesson. Know your limits, know your boundaries, realize that it's very possible that every child is going through something embarrassing, something potentially dangerous, something that they may not be able to handle, but they're really struggling with, trying to make sense of. And if you are that trusted adult, and you're detected, and you're chosen as being the one to hold that information, know what to do with it. A little bit of a return to the issues with my mom. So this is going to be a bit of a review session for you. So bear with me. She was always known as being a bit of a cynical, sour-spirited person. And I think in some ways I inherited that. And I've worked hard at getting around that proneness to negativity, proneness to be excessively critical of things, overthinking, over-processing, and not using the simple mind. I'm not talking about the awesome Scottish alt-pop group in the 80s and 90s, but I'm talking about accepting things at face value. It's hard to do because if you are a negative sort of leaning person, you are gearing yourself towards thinking the worst. So something that might be simple and good might come across as being much worse. It's hard to get around that. And I know from personal experience that's the case. And for my mom, it really was the case. There was virtually nothing, no event, no occurrence that she could not be tempted to treat as a negative, as reasons to argue with me. Now, my birthday was just last week. Turned 49. And I still deal with problems of sleep. And I would be willing to bet my life that came from the problems of my mother. Because what she would do is in the middle of the night, after my dad went to bed, this is when she's all liquored up, she'd take her shoes, or my shoes, and throw them at my door to wake me up. And if I didn't get up right away, I'd hear another thud. That's the other shoe hitting that door. And I'd get up, and then she would tell me that I did something wrong on that day. Something that didn't even occur to me. Well, she said I did something wrong, therefore she's gonna, yell at me or just make me feel very small for something very trivial. And a lot of times I stand there and I just take it. And I'd eventually cry, and sometimes that would cause her to just slightly change her approach. But after an hour and a half of standing there, listening to her complain about something, she would go off and either return to watching TV or just go to bed, drunk off her mind. And I'd go to bed and feel little, squashed between the fingers of a drunken, manic-depressive mother who could not wait to find something wrong to complain about. And I was her target many, 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 many times on that. And this is where, I would have to more or less bottle things up because my family was of no real help. The best they could do is shelter me for a while and then try to keep me happy through spoiling, through, buying me things, taking me out, being very good-hearted. There's no critique of that. It's just there was a better way of handling that problem, and it wasn't by just buying me out. It could have been by approaching the problem directly, maybe making a few ultimatums for my sake because I was the child in the family at that time. But no, everyone was there very afraid of her, afraid of what she might do in response. And she was very stubborn too. Heck, even when she was on her last legs, contracting cancer. She had lung cancer due to basically a long life of smoking. Metastasized, went to her brain, took her life. Very quick. Even during that time, she was very stubborn. Didn't reveal to us that she knew she had cancer for a long time before it really hit her. She would try going to the doctor and kept it very mum for my dad and I. And then when it came time for us to be able to help her out and do things, it was way too late. She was just that way. And I took some of those features. I inherited some of that thinking. I don't like to be fawned over or worried about. And I sometimes wonder what would happen if I befell the same situation as she. And I'm not the only one. And that's the point here. I think there are kids out there who are dealing with certain problems that they may not quite fully understand. But man, their feelings are real. And what can we do to help quell those problems, to just make things better for them in school? And I think it really just comes down to what I said before. You behave and you act and you work as a trusted adult, open doors of opportunity and communication, and be that safe space, that good listening ear for them. And this video is probably going to be a little short due to the weather and the fact that my phone is about at 20% right now. It'll be gobbled up here in a second. I want to recount a situation I had last season. Well, let me restate that. Not last season. It was 2 seasons ago when I was a one-on-one assistant with a 5th grade boy. I had him in the office in one of the conference rooms. And we're taking a test. In his IEP, he had to have tests read to him, or at least be in his presence as he's taking a test. By the way, this is our BMX biking track. It used to be a big hill for soapbox derbies. Eventually became a great sledding hill. They got rid of that. So I was in there with him, taking a test. I'd read certain questions to him. It was no big deal. Standard protocol for him. Did a nice job with it. As we were getting ready to go, we heard a clamor just outside the conference door. And it was some mom yelling at the office staff. Apparently her daughter, who was in pre-K, keep that in mind, pre-K, had done something and it got her in trouble, and they had to call mom to go pick her up. Well, the mom was irate because, she probably was at work, and it was a hassle to leave work and pick up her child, as we hear all the time. And she gives the office people, earful, as if it's their fault. They're just the messengers here. And the boy and I are leaving the conference room, and as soon as we leave, this mom and her daughter walk by. The mom tells the daughter, and I'm going to say the word. I know this is generally a kid-friendly sort of video series, but I'm going to say it for effect. She goes, "Well, I'm going to beat your ass when we get home." And she kind of says it just above, a quiet sort of delivery, just loud enough for everyone to hear it. And she walks by, goes through the little door to the outside, and that's it. And we stopped. The boy and I stopped, and we looked at each other, and his face, he had this wide-eyed, open mouth sort of look, and I did the same thing. It was like, oh my goodness, that's awful. Now, the particular demographic, the neighborhood, however you want to describe it, of people that we serve, it's low income, if not completely adjacent to poverty level. And again, it's not the kid's fault. Never it is. But the behavior is very typical for that. You hear a lot about poverty and crime, the interwoven fingers of those two facets of human existence. And we get it. But that sort of talk, that sort of rather explicit form of threat to a child, we do hear that much more often than I think we would in a normal, so to speak, environment at school. If we had lived somewhere else, maybe an upper scale neighborhood, I don't believe we would hear it as often. Could be wrong. I think this is a side effect of low income, poverty level sort of reasoning. So when that mom comes through, she throws away her, better judgment and gives an audible, clearly audible signal that she's going to do something to this child. And in that moment, and by the way, this was my first year working at this particular school, I looked over at the office help. I was curious what they were going to do. I could have guessed they were going to make a call to, DPS, Department of Child Protective Services, not DPS, CPS, somewhere like that, and say, look, this woman just threatened this child on our property. No, they didn't make that call. And I didn't either. Because I didn't want to do something that was wrong. And by wrong, I meant, is this what you do in this position? If you work in a school and you hear this, is that the proper response? I wasn't sure if that was the case. So I looked over at the office help, getting some guidance to see what they would do, and they didn't do anything. They just kind of looked at her as she left. They looked at each other, and they went back to their job. So the boy and I went back to the classroom, and I'm sure he was thinking about that, and I was too. The rest of the day, I kept thinking, did I do the right thing by not speaking up? And even thinking about it now, I don't know what happened to that little girl. Did the mom really, quote, beat her ass? What does that even mean? Are we desensitized to that sort of talk now, where we just presume it means a spanking? But that's not what she said. She said something much more violent, and I think as staff, we should probably treat that a little more seriously. If we truly care about these kids, I think we should respond accordingly. We heard something, we're gonna make a call. I mean, how many of you who work in a school have heard the line, see something, say something? Hear something, make a call. Find something, do something. Any variation of that applies here. What do you do? If you notice that your own management, your own authority figures in your school are doing nothing, what do? Do you presume that means you're not supposed to do something? I wouldn't blame you for thinking that. They're the ones in the office. They're the front line. If they're not doing anything, why should I care? And I think that's the takeaway. The problem is, I do care. And what could have happened? Here's what could have happened. I could have taken my one-on-one student back up to the classroom. I could have come right back down to the office and said, hey, who was that woman? And if they ask why, say, I'm going to make a call. I'm going to make a call to the appropriate department, file a complaint over concern that this child is going to be violently hurt. And I don't know what our office would have done. It's possible they would have recognized my care, maybe helped me a little bit understand what the proper method is. They could have also said, well, we hear that a lot. We presume it just means spanking or some other form of corporal punishment, and we let it go. but I'm not sure if that satisfies me. I worked for a company for a considerable amount of time, not a long time, but I did it enough to become a liaison for a school. I did it enough to become a life skills coach who would bring together an estranged set of children with their mom or dad or combination of both to watch over meetings and things like that, to take notes and to see if those parents are trying their best to get their kids back under their own guidance and control. So I had to be very careful about how I would take those notes. I would have to detail what was said, the vibe of the meetings, what the parents brought for the kids. Were there, quick and frequent showings of love and commitment? Were there a lot of hugs, kisses, good talk, concerned, question asking about, how's your day? How was your last weekend? You were going to do this with such and such. So I had to be very particular about how I wrote my notes because I had to reflect what was going on. So when I'm in that office with my student, we overhear this woman basically threaten this little pre-K'er. That perks my alarms. That says, hey, I've got to make that note. I got to do something about this. The office folks didn't. So clearly I'm at a bit of a quandary. What do I do? What I figured out is I'm going to do whatever the heck I want to do going forward. If I feel it necessary, I'm going to make the call. I'm not going to wait around for people to tell me, well, they've been here before and they've said similar things in the past while in the office, so we just kind of presume they mean a spanking or the kid's going to get in trouble. How many kids have lost their lives because someone didn't do something when they could have? If anything, it's a complaint. On our property, she made a physical threat to a child. What happens to me if I do that? I get fired. What happens to any of those office people if they had to do that or had done that? They would have been fired. Principal would have been fired and never got a job again. But that mom just gets away with it. Why? Because she's mom. And I think that's what ticks me off the most. There is a very sinister privilege that parents get that everyone else doesn't. You turn the tables one bit, and there's a lot of problem. Well, you aim it back at those parents, no big deal. Kids have died because of that. Kids have been seriously hurt because of that. Kids have been denied help because of that. So one of the things I'm thinking about for this new season is if I hear any parent make any sort of comment to their own kid or about their kid with that kid in tow, I'm going to make a call. If I get in trouble for it, at least I'm doing the right thing. I'm making darn sure that kid is going to be safe and that nobody's going to say those things on our property. Be nice to do that for all kids. Wish I could be everywhere. But then again, since I can't, I think it's time we decide communally that when we hear those things, we do something about it. We may not be able to change the world, but we might be helping one child, a kid who might need us. We're about 35 minutes on this video. Hoping to not run out of power here. Thanks for joining me today. I am not as soaked as I thought I would be, given the temperature of the day. That's a strange flower. I will talk to you soon. If you're in the heat, take care. Don't overwork yourself. Have a good remainder of your week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.